We pick up in a dark forest at nighttime outside of a Fire Nation outpost, where Ty Lee is bringing tea to some of her friends as a group of 4 hooded firebenders sneaks into the base wearing masks on their faces, and we see one of them firing a small bead of blue fire into the grain stockpile, which creates a massive explosion in the camp. This explosion was clearly meant to be a bit larger as it doesn't quite cover the retreat of our 4 suspects, but when they get surrounded, Ty Lee immediately knows who is up to this and tells Azula that Fire Lord Zuko has had enough of her sabotage, and she dives into apprehend these 4 when out of the group a blonde masked bender steps up and gets immediately put down. As she's knocked out and her mask flies off, one of the masked men screams, "Let Chio go," as Ty Lee dives in to take care of him as well, and his friends try to fight back and keep from being arrested. This fight ends up being really close between both sides as eventually Azula comes up against Ty Lee and nearly takes her out using her lightning bending, since after all to her Ty Lee is a traitor. But as Azula creates a wall of blue fire and they all make their escape, Chio realizes that she's been left behind. However, back at her camp it seems like tensions are raised to a maximum as they all start planning ways to get their friend Chio back, who Azula just abandoned. But Azula tells the girl named Zirin that she has no plan of going back for Chio, since as a fire warrior, she should accept that sometimes there are casualties of war. Zirin tells her that this isn't war and they're just pathetically burning down some of Zuko's food supplies, which is nothing like the work that Azula told them that they would be doing, so her and the entire group have decided that they need to move on from doing this kind of stuff or they're gonna abandon Azula entirely. At this point, Azula gets up and starts to reassert her dominance by telling Zirin and all the other girls in the group that she rescued them all from an institution for rebellious women and gave them all a purpose in life. For some reason, this speech doesn't work, and in the morning she finds out that they all abandoned her in the middle of the night, so now the search for these traitors begins. But as she goes out to search for them and make them pay, we see the weather starting to get really bad as Azula trips and falls face first in the mud and rain starts to fall heavily with thunder and lightning ringing off in the background. After venturing through the cold night for a bit, we see Azula spot a light in the distance as she comes to a clearing and spots a large fire sage temple, only deciding to go in because she's hungry. Inside, she finds a woman all by herself making dinner over a small fire, who tells Azula that this place is just a rest spot for lost or tired travelers, but everyone who makes it here comes here for a reason. After being rude to this woman, Azula eventually takes her room and falls asleep, but she's awoken by 2 old ladies she recognizes from her childhood as they lead her out the door of her house on Ember Island, and suddenly she sees her entire family in front of her having a happy day on the beach. As they congratulate her on all her achievements like killing the Avatar and capturing Ba Sing Se to become the Fire Lord. As she questions if any of this is real, her mother comes up to her and hugs her, telling Azula how proud she is of her, and just like that, all of the questions fade away as something weird is going on here. Off on the side, we see Mai and Ty Lee sitting on the beach together as they tell Azula none of this is real, because her mom would never be proud of her, as Mai adds in that Azula told them that her mom actually thought she was a monster. But Azula starts to get cold and angry as she tells the 2 of them to shut up because they don't know what they're talking about. Mai looks up and tells Azula that she knows the real her, and again repeats that none of this is actually happening as a strange blue energy starts to gather around Azula, who yells "shut up" to Mai before waking up from her dream in a cold sweat. As she wakes up, the woman in the temple tells her that she has to leave immediately. However, as Azula leaves, she notices that the forest outside of the fire temple is really foggy on this night, and after running away in a straight line, she ends up right back at the entrance of where she just left as this story starts to take a spin into insanity while Azula walks back through the doors and finds a surprise waiting for her. She steps back into the temple she just ran out of and spots the woman she was with starting to freak out as she tells Azula that she can't control what comes next, and we see a strange blue energy gathering around Azula before she picks up a scorched rubber turtle duck and instantly becomes a girl again when she hears her mother's voice asking her what she's doing. Suddenly, the moment that Ozai and Ursa realize Azula was a firebender plays out like a memory inside of this temple. However, in this version, her mother tells her that she's so proud of her, unlike in real life where Azula remembers her mother being afraid, and in her mind, the memories start to crack and merge together. Azula realizes this is all fake as the woman behind her tells her that she was just trying to give Azula what she wanted, and Azula realizes this woman is far more than just some random monk or passerby as she lets loose a bolt of blue fire towards her, and the woman easily jumps away, hanging from the ceiling upside down, starting to take on a far more monstrous appearance. Azula tells the beast that she doesn't want anything from her family. The only one she respects is her father, and now that Aang has taken his bending away, the only one with the rightful claims to the Fire Nation is her and not her brother. But in that moment, the monster says that Azula is gonna get exactly what she's owed, as suddenly we see the door to the temple open and Ty Lee walks in as a new battle approaches. As Ty Lee enters the spirit temple, Azula wonders if she's just another illusion, but Ty Lee explains that she was tracking Azula's squad and got separated from the Kyoshi warriors, so this is where she ended up. Ty Lee looks up and realizes there's a creepy woman clinging to the rafters above them, and Azula tells her to ignore that since Azula doesn't even think she's real. But we see the beasts of the temple get really confused when Ty Lee smiles and waves towards her, asking if she wants her to read her aura. From this point on, Azula starts to bend fire towards Ty Lee as she tells her how slow she's gotten because of the Kyoshi armor, but Ty Lee replies that she wears it because this is what her sisters warriors wear. Azula reminds Ty Lee of the time that they nearly destroyed the Kyoshi warriors, telling her that she loved it at the time, no matter how much she wants to pretend to be one of them now. But at the end of the day, the one that truly ruined that group was Mai, who Azula claims did it all for Zuko, a boy that didn't even want her. It's here where Ty Lee tells her that it's unhealthy to be so interested in other people's relationships, as she gets kicked into a wall by the blue firebender as the beast of the temple watches. But when Azula realizes she knocked her ex-friend out, the beast has one simple question: are you going to kill her? Seeming like she's trying to get Azula to do it. As suddenly on the side we see Ursa, Azula's mom, walk in the frame as Azula once again gets very calm but confused, saying you're not real. However, to her surprise, when her mother kneels down before her and starts to hold her like she used to, it feels real enough. Azula tells her mother that she ruined her by saving Zuko and Grandpa Azulon wanted to get rid of him, and because she abandoned them, she wasn't there to protect Azula from becoming Ozai's deadly firebending weapon, saying because of her mother she didn't even have a choice. Azula tells her mother that if she just stayed, Azula wouldn't have had to turn out this way. She tells her mother that she's alone and has been betrayed over and over again by everyone who should have stayed loyal to her. Her mother asks her if she wants everyone to come back to her asking for forgiveness, and when Azula says yes, we see Ty Lee sit up and say, "Oh please," as she's actually suddenly been transformed into Mai, telling Azula that she's not the victim here. Having had enough of the spirit trickery, Azula tries to run out of the temple saying she's leaving, but when she opens the door, all she sees is an empty world of white. Mai tells Azula that she has a theory about her, and that it's that everyone betrays her because she's a terrible person who gets what she deserves. Azula turns around shocked and furious, but sees Ty Lee kneeling in front of her and finally falls to her knees saying, "Enough, show me what's real." Ty Lee rolls around saying she's real, and when Azula says nonsense, Ty Lee says Azula loves believing in nonsense, like the fact that her and Ty Lee were ever friends, when really she only came along to hunt the Avatar because Azula threatened her life and made her leave the circus where she was maybe seen as a loser, but at least she was happy. Azula gets angry saying she gave them a chance to do something important, and now Ty Lee is just a Kyoshi warrior. But it's at that point where Ty Lee becomes Mai again, telling Azula that it's only her who thinks that people around her wouldn't be able to survive if not for Azula. When Azula finally responds, she turns and realizes that Mai is actually turned into Zuko, who tells her that she manipulates everyone around her because she can't stand the idea of being alone, because that would mean having to deal with all the horrible things she's done, as Azula stands there confused and watches Zuko get bigger and bigger as her brother becomes a massive demon and Azula is in danger, with Azula beginning to charge her lightning in response. As point blank, we watch Azula fire a full force lightning bolt right into Zuko's chest, causing the large demon to fall right where he stood, now defeated. But Azula, now more confident than ever, turns towards her and the spirit with flames in her hands, telling them that she's had enough. This causes the true beast of the spirit temple to reveal itself, as behind Azula we see a massive spiritual snake spider that says, "Very well, little Fire Lord," as all around Azula the illusions of her family members and even the white-haired woman all begin to fade away into a blue mist. The creature tells Azula that at the end of the day, she hasn't lied to her once. This is a sacred place for those who wish for peace and rest. However, Azula seems to not wish for those things, despite this being considered a crossroads where those who need a second chance can take it and become a better person. As disgusted as Azula is by this monster, it tells her that she can take on many forms, and right now it's only a reflection of Azula's inner self. We see Azula respond that redemption and apologies are for the weak, and she's different because she's the daughter of Ozai the Phoenix King and the rightful Fire Lord. As she says this, she puts both of her hands together, charging up as much lightning as she possibly can to fit her fingers, yelling out that she doesn't take kindly to the meddling of spirits, as she unleashes her lightning and we watch it fill the body of the creature, causing a massive explosion that surrounds Azula in dust and debris. The entire temple begins to cave in around her, putting her in danger. However, as Azula closes her eyes and opens them again, she finds that she's actually now outside perfectly safe, as she looks around for a second and laughs, saying she knew none of the spirit tricks were real, and puts on her cloak to go and look for her traitors. In the back we see a small version of the spirit world bug escaping as it watches Azula disappear into the distance, and as she finds a camp, she sees how they actually did go back and save Chio, noticing how happy this entire group is together, as instead of getting revenge, Azula walks away promising to find new followers and a place to rule, maybe actually being changed by her experience in the spirit world as this story ends.